Hey everybody, welcome back. I want to talk about goth identity. I want to talk about how we became goth, how we found it, how we realized it's who we were, and what I'm finding today versus how it compares to when I was younger, and why it's confusing to not only myself but a lot of other people. But I want to get right into it. So identity should be an easy thing when it comes to goth, but I've noticed online that there are a lot of people, and I've noticed this since the start of my channel, that there are so many people who don't know who they are. And it's as simple as, am I a goth? And I find that so weird, but I feel bad saying it's weird because these people are quite genuine. Whether it be young or old, it's just people who have found the goth scene for the first time and are genuinely confused. It's a question that's been posed in the comments on my channel since the very beginning. I see it on other people's channels. I see it in some YouTube comment. I see it on TikTok. I see it on Reddit. I see it on Facebook. I see it everywhere. You have people kind of describing themselves right down to the color of their nail polish and saying, okay guys, diagnose me. Am I a goth? And it's so weird because, and I don't know if this is a generational thing. I mean, it has to be, because back when I was younger, it was something that you just knew. That was the easy part. Because when it came to identity and people who were genuinely confused and struggling with it, they were struggling with things like sexuality. They were struggling with gender. They were struggling with religion. They were struggling with things that was going to affect the course of their lives for forever. Like, for example, if their parents were very traditional in the sense where they wanted their kid to grow up, get married, have a kid, it wasn't them. It wasn't who they were. So it was all things that affected the person's life. But the subculture, music, that's the fun stuff. That's the easy stuff. That's the escape, the departure from all these pressing issues that are like clouding our brains and clouding our souls and making us wonder, like, what are we going to do? And causing all that stress and anxiety. But subculture, music, people, or group, that's a relief from all the stress. That's the vacation from it all. And it's also the very thing that helps you figure out the answers to the big questions. It's not the big question itself, though. And it was just as easy as asking any person back then, let's say in 1997, like, of course I'm a goth. I listen to goth music. And it wasn't a matter of, it wasn't up for debate. Nobody ever questioned, oh, am I a goth? Am I grunge? Who am I? It was just as simple as asking yourself, what music do I listen to? Okay, that's who I am. But it's not so easy now. And I know that a lot of it has to come from online, because I see how people are and I see how people like to break things down. And everyone is very much, they're very identity focused, but they want that identity to be categorized by so many different things. Like, you're never just one thing, you're 12. You're not just a goth. You're this type of goth. You're one type based on fashion, another type based on music, another type based on where you were born. It's so specific, and it doesn't have to be that way, but it's been made that way by a lot of people who, I hate to say it, is in 1 year's time, they're probably not going to be anywhere near involved in the goth subculture, and you're still going to be sat there scratching your head wondering where you belong when they've moved on to the next thing. So if something seems overly complicated, that's because it is convoluted crap. And goth shouldn't have to be that way. I view goth music, and this is if you're wondering whether or not you're a goth. There's a lot of people who will also, again, delving into content online, who think that they hate goth music because they've never listened to anything beyond 1986. And they've had it embedded into their brains that there is no such goth music that exists beyond that period, because only OG goth is real goth, and anything beyond that is fake. So there are a lot of people who are on different social media platforms that like to kind of espouse the concept that there is no real goth music that exists beyond like 1986. So if you're not listening to like Alien Sex Fiend, Executive Slack, Skeletal Family, Ghost Dance, what have you, Bauhaus, that you're not a goth. And there are a lot of people who just don't resonate with that music. And there are a lot of amazing goth bands that exist far beyond 1986. But you have a lot of people who are going around confused as hell, wondering who the hell they are, knowing that they like other goth music, but have been told that they're not a legitimate goth or not part of the subculture because They don't like Joy Division. A lot of people don't like Joy Division, and that is okay. There's nothing wrong with not liking any music that is, I guess, deemed by today's terms old school post-punk. There are so many different genres that exist under the umbrella or subgenres that is ever growing of goth music. I know for myself that I did not like goth music right away. So I kind of view goth music in the same way that a lot of people will view cats, that you don't choose the cat chooses you. And I think goth music is much the same way. It's not a matter of whether or not you decide you want to like it. It's whether or not it finds you and just grasps at your soul and says, no, you're mine now. And that's very much how I view it, because I tried to like goth music once before, way back when, and I hated it. Many of you have heard the story before. I will spare you the specific details, but I will just sort of abridge it and say, I heard it, I hated it. I got into old school industrial music and new wave music, and there was something about the combination of industrial and new wave, which you have like the synth-driven romance of new wave, and then you have like the dark under and overtones and the driving beats of industrial. And if you bring them together, it kind of prepares you for goth, if that makes sense. So by the time I got a little bit older, and I say a little bit, it was like a year, I realized, oh, I really like this. I listened to one song, and it just choke slammed me to the ground, and I'm like, this is it. This is who I am. And I didn't want to listen to anything else. And that's really how it happens, because I chose the cat. Cat didn't want me. And later on, the cat chose me. And it's been with me ever since. I hope that analogy makes sense. But I see all of these people who are struggling with their identity with regards to goth, and it bothers me, because I feel bad, because this isn't the stuff that should be the hard stuff. This is the stuff that's meant to be the vacation. This is meant to be like your salvation from all the hard things that are out there, the pressing issues. And you shouldn't have other people kind of dictate who you are. So there are a lot of people out there that nowadays want to simplify things so hard into like a million categories. So people like to fit into not just one thing, but a million things. And rather than just be themselves and be this kind of fluid thing, it's you are 17 different subcategories of this other category. And it's not that complicated. If something as simple as subculture seems that complicated, it's because it's been convoluted and it's bull. So it should be as simple as this. Do you like goth music? Fantastic. So another thing that I've heard quite a lot is, I know I'm a goth because I love the clothing, but I don't listen to the music. And I've tried to listen to it and I don't like it. And I'll say, okay, well, what have you listened to? And they'll name like 3 new metal bands and Bauhaus. So it's very clear that a lot of people are not really understanding the concept of subgenres. You might love goth music. In fact, I'm almost positive that a lot of the people that will pose this question by saying, why am I not considered a goth, or why am I not part of the subculture if I don't like the music? Because I just don't like it. And I always say the same thing. I bet you anything, you do like the music, but you just don't know it yet. Because there's so many different sounds, and the genres are ever evolving. Because now you have subgenres that straddle like 6 different subgenres. And what I like about it is that it's not something that has you question, is this or isn't this goth? Because somehow the best way I can think to describe it, because I'm not very technically inclined when it comes to music, so I can't explain it to you on a technical level, but what I can say to you is that it all fits the same core. It has the same energy, the same soul. The second you hear something that isn't, you know it's not right off the bat. And I'm sure a lot of you musical buffs will be able to explain this a lot better than me. So I apologize for not having the right definition for you, but it either fits or it doesn't fit. So there were a lot of misconceptions I had when I was younger as well when it came to goth, because I had a lot of these ideas when I actually got into the subculture and I got into the music and I realized that this is who I am. I looked around at other people and said, okay, well, I need to be that. I need to embody that. That's who I need to become. Because to me, Goth music was about being intelligent. It was about being cultured. It was about being refined. It was about being well-read. It was about being artistic. And I was like, I have a lot of work to do if I'm going to really be involved in that way. I don't want to be seen as, as a poser. I really would love to be accepted among the people that I feel I'm part of. And the things, it wasn't just me, my friends did it too, and I see it happen today, but with different things. I see it more happen with fashion because the internet is it's a visual driven thing anyway. A lot of people are I hate to say it, have a very short attention span. Not everybody, but you tend to find them on TikTok because they like that short form content because they can't pay attention for more than 12 seconds anyway. But when you have people like that, they're very visually driven. So they will kind of impose these fashion or aesthetic concepts to a person, and they will articulate and they will fully believe that, oh, you don't fit this physical mold, therefore you're not the person that you feel in your soul. You're not the person who listens to the music you do. The music, oh, who gives a crap? You get a lot of people who get their identity called into question, challenged, and even discounted, telling them that they're not a goth, even though they listen to the music, because you have these very visually driven people who will say, no, you don't have your face spray painted white with these hair, you're not a goth, which there are only a certain amount of people who do look like that, but that is not the end all be all of goth. It can cause a person who's very deeply involved in the subculture, who loves the music so much but dresses very subdued, to feel very dejected when they have a person standing there with their face painted white, hair teased, and Susie makeup, telling them that they're not a goth because they don't physically fit that mold. And that is so not the case, because you have both ends of the spectrum. You have the person that looks subdued and is incredibly in depth when it comes to the music and very much part of the subculture, but you also have the person who fits the very stereotypical trad aesthetic. And I know that some people disagree, but I don't think that it's really for us to kind of tell people what they can and can't look like aesthetically, because there are a lot of people who resonate with a certain look, and I think fashion is very subjective. And I think that sometimes fashionably, people connect to fashion on a cultural level. Like they view fashion as part of their identity. And there are people who really do like to don the goth aesthetic, will straight up tell you that they're not a goth, but they do love the clothing. And I think that's okay. I think there's nothing wrong with that. I know there are a lot of people who disagree when it comes to fashion. I'm somebody who's very fashionably inclined. I, designed clothes for many years. I get it. And I know that it's an art form. So far be it from me to begrudge anybody their right to wear whatever they want. However, if you were one of the people who bullied goths in high school and now you are donning the aesthetic and kind of making it your own, it seems very trendy and you owe a lot of people an apology. Just saying, that's just me. But for everyone else, wear it, who cares? If anything, you make the clothing a little bit more accessible to us. That makes our life a lot easier. When I was younger, myself and my friends included, a lot of the things that we felt that we needed to become in order to be goth, we really clung to, but they weren't natural to us. So I would write poetry, I would draw, I would paint, I tried to read as much as humanly possible because I wanted to have a very expansive vocabulary because I felt that's what goth was. And at the time it really was. I wanted to be able to, if the opportunity presented itself, to hold a conversation with some of the OGs, because what I had found by integrating within the subculture is that everybody was incredibly intelligent. They were well-spoken, expansive vocabulary, they were well-read. And I know that by comparison, being like a 15-year-old, 16-year-old, felt like an idiot. Running around, like listening to them speak it's with words I've never heard before. And it's not like I had the internet to like Google whatever the hell they just said. So it really was a matter of educating myself. Welcome to the 1995 edition Sophisticated Goth Starter Pack for baby bats full of preconceived notions and the energy and enthusiasm to back it up. First off, we have your cigarette holder for your clove, because nothing says drama like smoking a 10-foot-long black cigarette that smells like a Victorian dentist. A cigarette case for you to store your clothes, as no self-respecting creature of the night would pull out a cardboard box. Also, drama. Nothing screamed culture and sophistication quite like the opera-length glove. It is a glove that's fighting to be a sleeve. That is peak drama. Perfume oil. Patchouli was the go-to scent for many, myself included, until I switched to Air's Angel Dreams. Scent was important, and smelling like Love's Baby Soft or CK1 or whatever other mists and sprays they had was pedestrian. You had to smell mysterious, of another time, like a shop that sells candles and old books on the occult. A vintage, antique, or modern pewter pendant that looks like something pulled from the floorboards of a 200-year-old abandoned home, as nothing says cultured like wearing something older than your great-great-grandparents. This necklace is haunted, you know. You absorb the history through the skin. A calligraphy set. Ballpoint pens are for jocks and cattle auctioneers. You wanted your grocery list to look like it was written by Lestat. The word yogurt never looked so macabre. A dictionary and a thesaurus, so I was up to scratch on what the OGs were saying, and to give me the opportunity to use the most obscure and complex word rather than use just the simplest. Why use the word confused when you can use the word flummoxed? Also, more words gave me more ways that I can write more poems with my calligraphy pen using 500 variations of the word darkness. Birdcage veil. I made mine from netting up from the underskirts of things I picked up from thrift stores or straight up fishnet tights that bit the dust. It looks vampiric, sophisticated even, but it also masked the fact that I had not mastered the concept of eyeliner. Anne Rice novel. Everyone was reading Anne Rice, so I had to do it as well. I started with The Witching Hour because that was the one my friend Dawn had. Some of the things that myself and my friends found ourselves really trying to convince ourselves that we needed to become in order to be involved in the subculture were things like religion, for example. And mind you, we didn't have the resources to tell us that we were incorrect. Nobody told us specifically, okay, in order to be involved in Goth, this is what you need to be or this is what you need to become. It's just sort of things that seemed like we were supposed to do that. So it was kind of interesting the way that it happened, much like we found everything. We just knew somehow, and sometimes the things that you knew were wrong. And these were some of the things that were very much incorrect. So one of those things is I thought that Goths were heavily involved in witchcraft, so I needed to be involved in that as well. I needed to study paganism, Wicca, and I needed to practice things that involved like cauldrons, daggers, resins, and all of these different things. I had to buy every esoteric book that I can find in order to be part of the subculture. And I had no idea that Goths could be Christian, Goths could be Catholic, Lutheran, Protestant, Jewish. It didn't matter. You could be any religion or no religion and be involved in the subculture, and that it really had nothing to do with that. We just kind of assumed. A lot of assumptions were made. But you know what they say about assumptions, right? Another thing was things like kinks. I was far too young to think about things like that. One of the things that I had assumed is that Goths were not into anything vanilla, that we had to have a specific kink. Like you had to I'm not going to name things, but you had to be into these certain fetishes, and you had to go to fetish events as well to find that very thing. And I will tell you this, and I will tell you this as a cautionary tale. I found myself more than once at fetish events at far too young of an age, underage. Don't do it. I promise you, nothing good will come of it. Wait till you're older. And it was not long after that I realized that I shouldn't have been faking, because I pretended that I liked those things. I saw those things and, oh, those are exciting. Those things are interesting. They scared the crap out of me. I was 16 years old. I had no business being in that environment. I did a fetish fashion show at 16. I had high school the next day. I was in the 10th grade, but I did this fashion show. But if you saw the things that went on the stage and what I was wearing at the age of 16, that kind of thing would get people arrested nowadays. And I cringe, genuinely, shudder when I think about myself at that age. I shouldn't have been in that environment. I shouldn't have been in that situation. And in my head, being part of the goth scene, this is something that I had to be part of. And that is not true. It is far from the truth. It is not true. You be and you experiment and you you associate yourself with things that seem natural to you. If something is scary, that's your intuition and your instinct telling you to stay the hell away. You experiment and research from the privacy of your own room, in the comfort of your own space alone, when it came to the concept of learning, experience, discovery, adventure. all of these things back when I was younger led you to physical spaces. It's not something that you explored from the comfort of your own room. I mean, sometimes with your friends, you would often discuss these things, but it would lead to either a train or a car ride that took you somewhere, which could potentially put you in a very precarious situation. Versus now, those very same things, adventure, discovery, learning, it took you to your phone, or it took you to your laptop or your computer, and you did these things from the comfort of your own home, which removed that physical danger aspect. But I wonder if one is better, one is worse, or it's about the same. Because whereas you're not getting placed in physical spaces now, I would go and do these things as a teenager, but then I would come home, I would lay my head on my pillow listening to my music in my room, and I would ponder these things with no external stimuli trying to get into my brain and convince me of anything otherwise. Like, I would kind of weigh these things out and come to terms with things on my own. However, in 2023, you go home, you lay your head on your pillow, you have your phone in your hand and you're doom scrolling, and you have this information constantly coming in. So now it's always a constant influx of information regardless. You'll get notifications on your phone from Quora or Ask Me or Reddit or any of these places where a lot of this information is coming in. So it's just constantly being bombarded with all of these different things. And when I see that, I can understand where all of that confusion comes in. So back then, there was really no confusion. It was just a lot of hard lessons, but we knew who we were. I can categorically state that I knew who I was at a very young age. There was only one point in my life where I had that call to question, and that's when I was in an abusive situation. So in removing that for myself, what I ended up finding was things got a little bit easier, but then I lost who I was. And that was only one time, and it lasted 4 years. And as I said, music is medicine, and like that cat, it finds you, and it found me again, and it's brought me back from where I was. You fall out of it by way of life experiences, but you don't just ever start to hate the music, because if you did, it kind of wasn't part of you in the first place, and that's okay. So long as these people know who they are, they're happy with who they are, that in the grand scheme of things is all that ever really matters, is being happy. It's not about making other people happy. Making other people happy is fine so long as you don't do it to the detriment of yourself or compromise yourself in any way. I love making people happy. I love making people laugh. But no more will I ever do it to the detriment of myself. Something that I also think is important is to not hide any aspects of yourself. If there are interests that you have and you think, oh, I can't express those things because they're not goth, don't do that. Be who you are. Express those things. Some things that also don't change, something that I've noticed when I was younger versus today that still holds true, is that you will have people who, I did this as well, who will hide aspects of themselves, interests and hobbies that they have. Maybe you like some random different genre of music that is no way associated with goth, like German polka or something, and you're like, oh, I couldn't indulge in that, or I couldn't let anybody know that I like that very thing because they'll think I'm a poser. That's not true. This is something that has stood the test of time. It happened when I was younger, and it happens still today, where we were naive enough to think that there were certain aspects that were not in any way goth, and we had to hide those aspects of ourselves because there were things that we liked, interests that we had, or hobbies, and they're in no way goth, and nobody could know about it because it would ruin us. I have a perfect example of this that ended up being the funniest story, one of the funniest stories I've ever heard in my life. So I have these two friends, guy and a girl. The girl I've mentioned a bunch of times. The guy, you've seen him in pictures on my channel. I'm not going to mention them by name, but I will just say that they were together, they were driving around, and they were having this heartfelt moment, and one confessed to the other that they had this horrible secret. And this horrible secret was she loved the Dave Matthews Band. And she proceeded to pull out their entire discography from under her seat in her CD book and showed him, to which he said, I have a secret for you. I also love the Dave Matthews Band. They secretly listened to Dave Matthews Band together. They were goths, but they secretly listened to the Dave Matthews Band together, and they went to 2 concerts together as well. Never told anybody until years later. It's a very freeing part of a goth's existence once they kind of exit that hyper goth phase and realize that not everything has to be like dark and macabre in order to be part of your world. Like that is the only thing that can feasibly exist in order for you to be part of the subculture, that you can have interests and hobbies outside, and that doesn't in any way negate you as a person or your authenticity as a goth. And don't let things like fashion stress you out either, because yeah, fashion is important when it comes to the goth subculture, but it's not everything. Don't allow people to question your authenticity or make you think twice about who you are. If you're on a journey, by all means, be on that journey, but don't allow anybody to piss in your Cheerios. To all the people out there who are genuinely curious as to where they fall if you're a goth, I would suggest that you really stop reaching out and asking people for second, third, and fourth opinions to diagnose you, and instead look for the music. Go on Bandcamp, go on Spotify. Ask other goth YouTubers that post constant kind of content about the music to suggest some things, or look at the suggestions that they have. Really explore the different subgenres, because there really is something out there for everyone. And then the next question I would ask you, did you hear it or did you feel it? Because music itself is very evocative and it is medicine, not just goth music, but music itself. And there's a reason that people will listen to certain music when they want to create. They want to make art in some way, or they have a difficult decision to make. They're going for a long drive, or they're trying to just decompress. And the reason is music, the very thing that resonates with you, the type of music that resonates with you, it gets you just like you get it. And it has a way of opening you up and making you kind of receptive to the process that you're trying to become receptive to. Whether it's pulling those thoughts out of the recesses of your brain and making that big decision, getting you in that mode and in that mindset to be creative. Music itself is very, very evocative, and if goth does that for you, I think that kind of answers your question. But if you don't like the music, you find yourself thinking, it's okay, and you're just kind of listening to it because you feel like you have to, it's not for you. And there's nothing wrong with that. I don't think you should waste a moment of your time listening to music that you hate and doesn't resonate with you. Find the music that does, but at least try. Because claiming defeat without even listening to the music at all is such a waste. So if you're wondering if you're doing goth right, if you are stressing out about it, you're doing it wrong. I can categorically state that if it weren't for goth, I would be a very different person today. And the reason that I say that is that I came from a very horrifying home growing up. And I don't mean that in the sense where, my parents just didn't get me. I mean, there were police reports and CPS reports dating back to the 80s with my family. So things were not great at all. They were terrifying. And being involved in the goth scene helped me in so many varying ways, because it gave me something to look forward to. It gave me music that was healing in so many different ways. Every time I was broken, it fixed me. It gave me people who became my tribe, became my friends. It gave me a family that I didn't know that I could have. It showed me that there was more out there for me. Because when you're existing in a world where everything is just very basic, especially during that time, it was the early to mid 90s. And when you're existing in that period, everybody is just sort of striving to be normal. Everybody's fitting into these very normal boxes. You're listening to songs that are on the radio or on MTV. Nobody's digging any deeper than that. You have to look like everybody else. Straying from the norm was a very bad thing. So everything was very normal, very basic. Everybody followed the same pattern. So me growing up in the environment that I did, I kind of viewed myself in the category of like, okay, we're like the dregs of society kind of people. But when I stepped outside of that, kind of going into, by I guess the standards of the 90s were considered being obscure, kind of stepping outside your box, venturing into the unknown, it had also given me a sense of purpose, in the sense that I could strive for more. Because back in the early 90s, mid 90s, things were very cookie cutter, and you kind of followed a specific kind of protocol where everybody was just very basic. And being involved in different subcultures, kind of venturing out, and being fortunate to be in New York, I was exposed to different cultures, different people, and it opened my mind to different things. And it showed me that I'm capable of a lot more than just escaping my house by the skin of my teeth. That I could be intelligent. I could strive toward bigger and better things, all surrounded by incredibly creative and wonderful people and listening to music that, once again, it healed me. I hope you enjoyed. Thank you for watching. Until next time. Bye.